When did you first grow curious about the paranormal? Dare you dig deeper? You are listening to House of Asher.
And welcome back to another episode of House of Asher. I'm your host, Steve Asher, and let me do this semi-professional fade-out. I am almost talented. Anyway, welcome back to the show. You might be listening to us on Spotify, iHeart, iTunes, SoundCloud, a whole bunch of different stuff, but most likely, most of the global listeners are listening to us on Paranormal UK Radio. Plug, and thank you so much for letting me be a part of your little cabal. And please go check out House of Asher on YouTube, which you may be watching that as well here. And if so, please subscribe, share the link, whatnot. We'll cry, we'll laugh, and become a part of each other. Kind of like the, was it the Jeopardy song for Greg Ginn? Well, okay, I'm taking it way back. All right, but what we're doing tonight is we're going to get into the mind of a very unusual man. How do I want to word this? I'm almost scared I will not do enough of a correct homage to make this sound right. A man, he's definitely a man who does that thing that I dig. He likes to talk about, weird freaky B movies and whatnot. And I will do a quick little intro. And here it goes. Mr. Lobo, Cinema Insomnia. In the tradition of horror hosts and creature features, Mr. Lobo appears in brief vignettes and between segments, there it is, I screwed it up, of the late night movie in this nationally syndicated television show that is streamed on Roku, however you want to pronounce it. I can pronounce it any damn way I want to, on channel OSI 74. That's cool. That sounds like a really edgy, like new wave band. I want to be in that band. Various companions and characters have appeared over the show's 18 years of duty. Dude, that's a long time. And like a houseplant named Miss Mittens and a gorilla named, I'm going to screw this up, Cogorella. I may not have done it right. Also appearing in the breaks are items such as fake commercials, old movie trailers, classic commercials and footage and interviews shot at horror conventions, sci-fi conventions, and film festivals in and across the country. A new line of Mr. Lobo Cinema Insomnia retro collectors DVDs, catch your breath, have just been released for Halloween at oldies.com. Remember, they're not bad movies, just misunderstood. And let me do a drum roll. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Lobo.
Thank you so much for having me in the House of Asher. I guess we're all Ashers, especially if we're not using enough skin conditioner.
Yes,
but
this time of year can be rough. Go right ahead.
It gets dry. Again, the humor and the conditions are dry. I am a horror movie host. I don't know if that introduction made that clear, but I host movies. I host all kinds of movies, not just horror movies, cult movies. Some people say bad movies, but of course I like to say they're not bad movies, just misunderstood.
Well, I will say this. There's a thing. It's almost like a badge of honor. You take, some of the Corman films, obviously some of the Castle films. You take, good Lord, the Ed Wood films, which I've always said, I don't care what I do. I don't care if I'm writing. I don't care if I'm doing this podcast. I don't care if I'm a crossing guard. I want to make it weird. I want to make it Ed Woodish. I want to make it John Waters-ish, if that's probably a bastardization of the word.
It's a rare word, but all words are made up when you come right down to it.
Well, and that's the beauty and the freedom of, and I guess the anarchy of it. I grew up with a lot of punk and metal and stuff like that, and I kind of kept that ethos in my head and what I want to do, because I want to do what I want to do, and it's not disrespect for anyone. Just I don't want to do, like you said, I wouldn't want to be playing movies about frickin', I don't know, something really incredibly, the life of a dust mite, unless it's got some really gnarly footage I could put into like a B movie. So yeah, I totally understand. Chase your dragon, and well, maybe don't chase the dragon, but chase your dragon. Don't lose your dinosaur, or whatever the term was. But 18 years. How did you fall into this, man?
Well, I think, you were talking about being a rock star or being a horror host, being a punk rocker. I mean, that's a dream, right? That's something that everybody sort of thinks about or wants to do at one time or another. I grew up watching creature features in the 1970s, and I would have loved to do Bob's job. I would have loved to have been Rod Serling on the Twilight Zone, and I had those long monologues in my bathroom mirror, like I'm sure all kids did. And in the 90s, a friend of mine worked at a TV station, and he kept trying to get me over there because I'd been writing some stuff for sci-fi magazines, and I was doing some local comedy. And he was just saying, maybe we could try to get you a hosting gig or something. So I would go into the TV station on a Saturday when nobody was there, and I would try to work out a show. And all the stuff I was doing was absolutely terrible. I had no idea what I was doing, and they got rid of their library of films, and there was really no opportunity to really do that kind of a show at that time. And but I kept that dream going of wanting to do that, wanting to be that. And I wrote an article about Bob Wilkins for a magazine called Planet X. And Bob Wilkins was my host growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we did a live show with Bob where we showed It Came from Outer Space in a local tavern, and had the 3D glasses, and Bob introduced the movies, and I wrote a lot of jokes, a lot of material, and Bob said, hey, you should do this. You should sit in a chair and host horror movies. And I said, well, Bob, I don't think people do that anymore. That's kind of a lost art. This is about what you did when we were kids, and that was in the 90s, and then 8 years later I found myself working at a TV station in Sacramento, California, and they had a overnight movie on Saturday nights that ran 25 minutes short. And I went to the general manager and I said, you've got this movie every Saturday night that runs 20 minutes short. I could, have you ever tried to sit through a 6.5 minute commercial break? It's brutal. Can we fill that time with something? I have some ideas. And they didn't care, which was the best possible license you could get. And so we just started filling in the breaks in the middle of the night and I created Cinema Insomnia. And we brought the ratings up from hash marks in the Nielsen's, which was not even a discernible rating, to 22,000 homes at 3 a.m. So at that point, I really wanted to see if I could expand the show. They were kind of afraid of it because they didn't watch it. They didn't know what the hell we were doing. And they put us on hiatus, actually, for 4 months while they were trying to figure out if they wanted to put us in a better time slot or assign one of their producers to our show. And in that time frame, I just wanted to keep going because we had developed a little bit of a following. And so I begged off of the local ABC affiliate where I worked, and I started producing the show for public access. And after about a year of that, I just started syndicating it to stations across the country. And we've been going for 18 years now. And we're on streaming, and I have my own channel, OSI 74, for streaming, which is kind of like a UHF station from another parallel dimension.
Man, so much you just said there, I wanted to respond to, but I didn't want to break your flow. Definitely like the old UHF stuff, and it harkens back to that kind of a more innocent time in a way. And I don't mean that like a rose-colored glasses way. Just I remember one of the first times I ever heard or I ever saw the movie Black Sabbath, which is the classic Boris Karloff movie. Again, my family grew up, or my brothers grew up with a lot of metal and early proto-metal and whatever. And I heard that rain coming down, and I heard the boom coming in on the old on the Count of Five show. And I think that was a creature features. It seems like a lot of people kind of use the creatures feature thing, but like you said, it hit something deep inside my head. It might have been a tumor, I don't know, but it hit something and it resonated like a bell. And I don't think even in the 90s when everyone's flanneled out and all angry and You're mad at your dad, not me, kind of stuff. But doesn't matter. Young people of all ages, want that kind of that sort of fantastic beyond what they see every day. And even if it's like you said, even if it's sort of like a Attack of Killer Tomatoes or some really kind of schlocky type of deal, there's I don't know. It's its own world. It's like you can suspend belief. I mean, God, man, if you can watch half the stuff that's coming out now, you should be able to do that. But there was a classic trope to some of this stuff, good and evil and whatnot, but it got really into deep stuff, American Werewolf in London, great film. But like I Was a Teenage Werewolf touches on all that stuff of feeling like you're out of control and whatnot. I mean, you know this, and it for me, that was hitting stuff that I wasn't even realizing that I had going on in my head. It was like therapy. And, I my hat's off to you and anybody who does this. Because like you said, generally people do this purely for labor of love. Because like you said, it just depends on what kind of market you're in. Because it does come down to that. Unless you do your own things straight out like you kind of did. But when you had like those things like put on hiatus and stuff, was that more of a help than a hindrance? Do you think you would have maybe got as big or appreciated where you are now if you hadn't got kneecapped a little bit?
That's a good question. And I don't think I've ever been asked that question. I think that it did make me stop and focus down on the fact that I really enjoy what I was doing and I wanted to keep it going at any cost. And so then the fact that they actually put the show on hiatus made me think really seriously about it. At that point, I pretty much knew I was hooked. I really enjoyed the format. I enjoyed the on-screen persona that I created. I enjoyed the interaction with the fans because you're a companion for people. I mean, these are people who spend 2 hours every week with you. I mean, they're family members that I don't spend 2 hours a week with. So it's a very it's the best worst job in the world, and I knew at that point that I really wanted to keep going, and I knew that the station was going to fight me on everything that I wanted to do, so I had to somehow keep doing it off campus, which I think I always suspected. I mean, we had a $4 million TV studio. We could have made the show a lot more elaborate, and the show was just a black curtain and a rocking chair and a houseplant. And I think I did that subconsciously because I knew that, okay, there's no sophisticated makeup, there's no background. As long as I want to continue doing the show and that there's a camera that I can sit in front of, it could go on forever.
Well, and the thing that I notice about that as well, I mean, because it's one of these things you could have just totally BS me. It's like, well, I want to go for a certain aesthetic and I wanted to go kind of in a German minimalist type thing. You just went, no, what's the need? I mean, I do see a lot of different people who, it's almost like they're in a haunted attraction and there's so much going on and it draws away from what you're trying to, I mean, the character's the room. It's not the character. And you have something that's pretty simple, in relation to what's going on. And that is louder to me than all that noise that's going around on some other things, which I thought was kind of, I was like, you're so brave. But I'm saying it was kind of brave because, like you said, certain people would do it a certain way, and that's really cool.
Well, I always thought Elvira, it's just that lounge and a couple of candles, and that's it. She doesn't really have a whole dungeon. I think people imagine that there's a dungeon there, but it's really just that.
I'm sure they imagine a lot.
Yeah, it's true. With Elvira, there's a lot of imagining happening, and even with Mystery Science Theater, I mean, they've got supposedly there's a whole space station, but it's just that counter and that door behind them.
Right.
And it's fairly simple. It's one continuous shot. They don't even do multi-camera shots.
Right.
And I think that there's something to the simplicity of it. I think that the two things I thought of when I was developing the format was I really liked the Twilight Zone. I really liked Elvira. I like this idea of being outside of time or culture and kind of are we in the world of the subconscious? Is this a real place? Are we just floating in limbo? Is it just a black curtain? There's kind of a lot that you can do. And if you want to pantomime, I can sit in my chair with an oar and I'm in a boat. I can sit in my chair. I can put a plastic bubble on my head and my chair is a rocket ship. It takes you back to that, thing when you're 5 years old and you find a cardboard box and you can turn it into anything. Because we're kind of not in a real place, we can make that place anywhere, which is something I really liked about the Twilight Zone is that, Rod Serling he's this kind of spectral narrator. He isn't really a real person. You don't imagine him picking up his kids from soccer practice or, drinking. It's not a guy you go drink a beer with. This guy is like pan-dimensional or something. And I think that, Mystery Science Theater, they had a great premise, but I always felt it was so strongly sci-fi that if the movie wasn't a sci-fi movie, you kind of felt like you were on an off week. And the same with Elvira. They've got this this gothic presentation. You have this, succubus witch, in a castle presenting you a movie, and then it's alien contamination or something that's off genre,
Right.
and so I always thought that I didn't want to have I didn't want to be too strong in a horror or sci-fi in the wraparound because I wanted the wraparound to be able to flex and blend with whatever movie we were showing. And I really wanted to show other kinds of movies. There's so many great cult movies out there that aren't even sci-fi or horror that I wanted to show. And I like a lot of different kinds of movies.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, on my end, I come into the game because I was born in '69. I come into stuff with good Lord, I'm trying to think. Star Trek and all the different, like you said, Outer Limits. And for me, Twilight Zone, when I was really young, I was like, okay, these guys in suits and they're having these situations. For me, Night Gallery hit me harder. For some reason, maybe because I'm such a kitschy individual, and I appreciate it. But for whatever reason, it hit me maybe for whatever reason that was current. Most of that was in color, not in black and white. I did not quite understand the allure of black and white quite yet. But the thing is, back in the old days, all I had was a black and white. So I would see it like a TV guy and go, oh, this is what it looks like. That's cool. But what hit you first? Because for me, sci-fi and stuff was first.
Night Gallery is a big influence. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what about? I mean,
Night Gallery was a big influence, by the way.
Right. Well, what hit? I mean, what I should have said up first. And I apologize for rambling. Was it sci-fi that hit you first, or was it horror, or was it a combination of both? Was it whatever, angry spoken word, whatever? What pulled you in?
Yeah, I would say I think sci-fi. I mean, all of those things, to be honest, and nobody likes to hear this. Both horror and sci-fi are subgenres of fantasy.
Well, sure
and I think that I, as a kid, if it was Sinbad or Sword and Sandal or
Jason the Argonauts,
if it was a weird Jason and the Argonauts, if it was Star Trek, if it was a monster movie, the bottom line is that it was an escape from reality and a fantasy film. And I liked fantasy and fantastic films. I like movies that have imagination to them. And I think that the real scary stuff, I had such an overactive imagination that the straight horror stuff really bothered me for a long time.
Me too.
Because my imagination would run wild with it, and I'd have bedwetting nightmares for days on end. But I think that the big turning point for me was the love affair with Star Wars. I think once Star Wars came out, all bets were off. I was so enamored with creatures and monsters and fantasy violence, and suddenly I was into horror and sci-fi and everything. I think everything post Star Wars. And again, I think what's interesting about Star Wars is that Star Wars was the Beatles of my generation. You know, there hadn't been anything that was that dynamic before, or that hit that hard before, genre-wise. And I think the interesting thing about Star Wars is that everyone thinks the genre that Star Wars is sci-fi, but the two genres that Star Wars sits in, I think the heaviest is fantasy and special effects. Special effects was a genre. That was a new frontier that everybody was trying to crack. They were planning entire movies around the kinds of effects that they could create. So you had these really strange movies in the late 70s and the early 80s that were just a cacophony of bizarre visuals that were strung together with some kind of a story. And that story might be partially sci-fi, partially horror, partially – I mean, there were all of these kind of genre-hopping, kind of genre-defying, where it's like part horror, part comedy, part sci-fi,
Right.
part adventure.
Well, think of
And that was
Creep
kind of
Show
a very
and things like that.
interesting time.
You know, I was just saying. I mean,
Yeah,
look at stuff like
Creep
Creep
Show,
Show and Tales from the Crypt. You know, there's comedy and there's this and that, and it kind of overlaps. And I think they're flip sides. I think, like for me, and I've said this before in another podcast, and I'm sorry, but like when you're a little kid, I responded more to the, like when I was a little bitty, I just dug space and $6 Million Man, and you know, running, making the noises and stuff. I still do that. Anyway, not out loud though, but Star Trek was like my thing. And then when I
Me
was
too. I do that also.
okay, well you're super cool then. But we would go and like watch Star Trek and it's blast and shoot and you want to be Luke Skywalker. Then you get a little bit older, you have kids, you're kind of thinking, well, maybe Star Trek might be a better little thing. You know, no one's poor and starving and dying out, you know, unless you're encountering some salt-sucking whatever. So I think
Yes.
it's different things hit you at different ages and different points. But yeah, that is really weird. I was going to ask you two things. Pro or con silent runnings? That's what I want to know about. I am very curious about that. About silent runnings.
I'm losing you.
That's okay. Are you there, sir? Come in, Major Tom.
I'm sorry.
Are we there, sir? Are we there?
Can you hear me all right?
For the love of God, somebody save him. Yes, we're here. Are you there? Okay. Pro or con silent runnings?
Okay. I think we're better. I think it's better.
Okay.
Yes, Silent Running. Great film.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Is there a film or a series of films or whatever that you were like, man, I would love to have blah, 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 blah? Because I've heard different people talk about, like, I love gargoyles. That scared the clean hell out of me as a kid. I don't like sleeve stacks. I will punch one in the face. Please don't come up to me at a convention in a sleeve stack outfit. God bless you and your family, but I'm going to go to jail. I don't like sleeve stacks. Gargoyles, I dig them, but I don't want to put my face. You know, with the
Sleeve stacks were scary.
super scary. And I lived in the freaking woods. Caves are all over this damn place. You may as well have just said, hey, the trees are, you know, going to chew you up. Like the first time I saw Poltergeist, I was like, nah, F this. When I was older, I was living in out in county and just outside of town and watched Blair Witch Project, which you can say whatever you want to about Blair Witch Project. Before the time, I thought it was pretty interesting. And you have to go home into the woods. That's scary. That's scary crap. I'm sorry. But is there a film that you really wanted to get on that maybe due to contractual, they're still under whatever? Because there's so many kind of like, I forget the term, more or less they're like free to use films. I forgot the term for it.
Yeah, a lot of the films we use are royalty free or public domain
That's
or
it, public
orphaned
domain.
works.
Right.
Public domain, royalty free, fair use. There's a lot of different ways of slicing that.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, they don't come after you. That's the category we like. They don't come after you.
That's a good category to be in.
You know, we've shown some independent movies. We've shown some independent movies that people producers have been kind enough to let us use. A movie I would want to do, I would love to do some of the Universal films. I'd love to do The Invisible Man or Son of Frankenstein. I'd love to do The Blob. But what's interesting about it is that a lot of the movies on my show, they need a little help. I'm like Hamburger Helper, and I feel like I need the movie and the movie needs me. With some of the great classics, I don't know if you want a jackass interrupting every 6 minutes with some clever commentary.
Well, I mean, the thing is, though, if you're along for that ride, you're already there. You got your ticket, or you got the hand stamp, you got the whatever you call it, the Lenard, or whatever, the thing around your neck, lariat, Lenard, who freaking Lenard? Anyway, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, lanyard.
Thank you.
Got the lanyard. Yeah.
Thank you. You're there for the ride. You kind of know what to do. It's like you go to certain comedians, you know what you're going to get. You go to, you're going to Steven Seagal three-word movie thing. Stuff's going to blow up and he's going to hit somebody. So I think that people want that if they're, like I said, if they're your fans, and they kind of expect that tit for tat kind of Spider-Man-y bang 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 cutesy back and forth. You can go too far with it. I think you can go to the point where, like you said, eat up so much time and it's just kind of dopey. But I think if you hit it at the right times, it's good. It's usually right before a big change up in the scene or part of the movie, and I don't know, I like it. But what was I going to ask you? Oh yeah. So
I have a short attention span, so when I'm watching okay.
No, go right ahead. Go ahead, what you're saying.
Oh, I was saying I have a short attention span, and I'm watching the movie with my own sensibility, and when I start feeling a little dry or getting a little bored, that is where I feel like is the right time to come out and do some material to try to keep myself invested in the movie and keep everyone at home also invested in the film. But it is definitely a give and take. I feel like after a few minutes of me, you're ready to go back into the movie. And after a few minutes of the movie, you're ready to see a little bit more of me. And I think that anticipation, that fragmentation, that makes my material more enjoyable. It makes the movie hopefully more enjoyable. I think that a lot of people go, oh, I just skimmed through the movie. I really just want to see your bits. But I feel like if it was just a solid half an hour of me talking, I think it would lose something. I think the give and take is part of it, and the illusion that we're watching this movie together. Because when it comes down to it, a horror host is a companion. It's a cool character to watch a movie with on a Saturday night, and there's a magic trick that is happening where we're both on the show together. The audience is a character on the show. We are along for that ride. Newscasters read to you. A horror host is talking to you. And I think that there is kind of a special thing that happens when you can just make believe that this is just something happening in real time, and that character is just with you, and you're just enjoying this movie.
Well, I think there's a thing too of we are generally social animals, even a misanthrope like myself. But it's a thing of if you have somebody who's on the same tip of going like, yeah, this is great, isn't it? Or it's like, man, this is a real stinker, right? Like you said, that some people that might be their weekly thing, man, and that's what they cling to. Have you ever had anybody, like, say, do an independent film or do whatever, or for whatever reason go, okay, I'm not even released this yet. I want to air it on your show. I want it to break on your show. Have you ever had to start developing relationships with directors and filmmakers, maybe in your local area or just across the country? It's like, hey, I'm a fan. Could you do this?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We've had a lot of independent filmmakers who have had their films premiere on my show, which I would feel would not be an ideal first viewing of someone's independent work. But, a lot of the directors we worked with have actually felt that our presentation was the ideal way of watching their film, because in most cases their film was an homage to a film that they saw when they were kids on a show like my show.
Yeah, in this area, we still have like one drive-in in Calvert City, Kentucky, which is about 30 miles from me. But other than that, the old Grindhouse drive-in stuff, gone. That's the first time I saw, like, House of Wax with Vincent Price and stuff like that. And I think it was that, and man, what was it, like War of the Gargantuans or something like that. And like you said, what's great about what you do, it is sort of a mulligan stew, man. It's just a throwing in everything, which is great. Like, okay, well, maybe you'll like this film this week, or we'll turn around for next week. Maybe you'll like this one, or maybe you'll hate it, and let me know. And it really seems like you develop somewhat of a relationship with people over the time. Do you get like letters? I'm sure you get letters and things or whatever from people that's started way back, and how does it seem like the relationships? I mean, do you get like to be somewhat friendly with these people, or do you kind of keep the wall up and go like, I'd rather not want somebody outside my house at 2 a.m. crying?
Well, I've had people relocate themselves to be closer to us, which can be scary.
That's not scary.
I've had people who have had really wonderful. I've had really wonderful relationships with, and most of the fans I've actually had really great relationships with. I've never had any situation that I thought was too uncomfortable on a face-to-face basis. I try to make myself somewhat accessible. I think that we've had. I think probably the ones that come to mind the most is there was a girl named Katie who was severely disabled, and she hardly spoke. Oh. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it was the frequency of my voice, but she would suddenly come out of her condition and go, "What's Mr. Lobo going to show me tonight?" And her parents would freak out.
That's awesome.
Like they didn't understand it. And she would record my voice on a little tape recorder and hold it in her hands and play it back and listen to just little clips of my voice over and over again. And she wore the T-shirt 3 days a week only because her mother insisted on washing it and didn't allow her to wear it to church.
Right. Well, I understand.
And Katie, unfortunately, this went on for years, and we sent her, DVDs and stuff, and she had a fan club kit and all that stuff. And I never got to meet her in person. She was in Monroe, Louisiana, and I was in California, and I didn't have much business out that way at that time. And she succumbed to her illnesses and passed away. She was buried with her DVDs and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And it was really hard to handle.
Yeah, well, that's
when I was traveling across country, her father asked me to come by their place. And so I stopped by and I saw Katie's room, and she had her fan club kit on the wall, and it was all as she left it, all her pictures, all her newspaper clippings of Mr. Lobo, and her little tape recorder with my little voice recorded on it, and they treated us like gold. They took us out to dinner, and we stayed the night, and it was like staying in a hotel. There was nothing that we could have asked for, and it was pretty humbling to see how they have accepted this character as kind of a member of the family. This is someone who I've never met in person and had an effect on their lives and maybe made their lives a little better. And, we're not doing brain surgery or, we're not saving lives or anything, but it's really wonderful when you have those situations where it's like doing the show really made a difference for someone and it was really important to them. Right. And the positive ripples of that.
Well, I'll tell you this, and like I said, I don't know. You probably don't know this. Me and my wife, we do like special needs adoption, and two of our boys are special needs, and our oldest boy really loved like horror stuff and like old kind of B movies, and watch King Kong, and it's funny. It's funny now. I mean, back in the 30s, people were flipping out, jumping over chairs, and trying to hide. Like, what was the train robbery or something where the train looked like it was coming off the screen? People were having heart attacks back in the day. I mean, you have to kind of look at it.
Yeah.
But no, I mean,
film trains, man. That train is going to come off that screen,
right,
and get you.
Yeah, 3D before it was 3D. But yeah, I kept just saying, I know from living in that world, how much that certain things hit. And you're right. Maybe it was the tonality of your voice. Maybe it was sort of the simplicity of the set. There was not so much going on that they could focus solely on what was going on. And that was a good story. I thought you were going to give me like like Single White Lobo, like you'd have some wackadoo guy show up at your job with your glasses and the same kind of look, and go like, yeah, this isn't good. Yeah, play Missy for me, kind of stuff.
We've had some situations that edged toward that, but no, it's for the most part it's been pretty great, and I really cherish the relationships I've been able to have over the years with a lot of people, and now it's multi-generational. It's like Anita was a fan of the show. She showed it to her daughter. Her daughter went to college, ended up being an intern with us, and ended up being a fan, second generation fan of the show, and an intern on the show. So it's just it's amazing. It's when 18 years of doing this, some of these relationships go back a long time.
Yeah, and that's what's so funny, because there's that. Think about people that just really like horror movies, and really kind of get into older films and things like that. There's sort of a camaraderie there. I mean, anybody can go up to a show and catch whatever new this and that is going on, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's certain films I'm sure I've watched 100 times because for whatever reason it gets me, or at whatever point in time. And there is a really big sense of community, because you can pretty much talk to someone who's like a monster kid. And I had spoken to a gentleman who'd written a book about Rod Serling. And the name of it was Everything I Learned About Everything I Needed to Know I Learned from Twilight Zone. And we were talking. I said, "Well, being a monster kid," and he says, "What you got to understand, back in those days, that wasn't a term. People had to seek themselves out. But now, like you said, you come in, maybe you got a Frankenstein shirt on, or maybe you look at your arm, you've got like the Three Brides of Dracula, or maybe you've got some wonky thing hanging from your rearview mirror, or whatever. It looks like air freshener from Night of the Comet, or God knows what." And people automatically go, boom, okay, this is my tribe. I get you. I know what you're about. Boom. And it's like instant friends. That's what I love about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Find your tribe. And I think that's something that's changed so much, is that we're, I think that as a kid, especially if you're a 70s or an 80s kid, before pre-internet and pre some of these major conventions, you associate it with being alienated. You associate it with being maligned. You associate it with your friends not understanding it, or your mom thinks it's stupid, or and then to suddenly realize that the weirdos are not that weird, and there's a lot of them, and across the country, and obviously so. They couldn't sustain all of these movies and comic books if it was just you. Of course, there are plenty of other people who love this stuff and support it and are keeping the flames going. I like to say we're all the children of creature features, and a lot of people who maybe are fans of it that maybe don't admit it. But there are. It's amazing to suddenly have to like this material on its own terms, not in spite of anyone, not because a lot of us, I think, are still used to being maligned. I think a lot of us are still used to being marginalized marginalized because of the things that we like, and we have to now find new motivations, because it's not like punk rock anymore where it's like, nobody understands me, nobody gets this. It's like lots of people get it. It's because it's good stuff, and it's out there. So now you have to just be honest with yourself and go, well, I like this. I just like this because I like it, and not because of any countercultural reason. It's just because it resonates with me and it speaks to me.
Okay, look at a guy like who's kind of did the hard stuff, but like in music, like Alice Cooper, right? His dad was a big preacher, but he loved rock and roll. Had a lot to do with him kind of learning his chops and learning this stuff from his old man. There is a purity there, and where I don't know. I feel I've met so many different people just from doing my show here, from horror people to music people to literary to whatever, psychics, and different people had different weird experiences. Almost like that show, what was it that Vinkman did, and he was like, hairless cats, weird, right? From Ghostbusters.
Oh yeah, yes.
Like into
Vinkman,
World of the Psychic.
World of the Psychic.
Yeah.
World of the Psychic.
Right. So it's sort of like, that's okay, and that's what I'm saying. It's a safe place for you to kind of open up and kind of let your monster hair down and your sci-fi hair down and do all that stuff. Because like you said, when we were kids, nerd was not the freaking name you wanted. I usually would get more like a dweeb or a spaz, but nerd was not cool. Monster movie was
no.
Especially like the classic stuff, even some of the Hammer film stuff. It was getting a bit dated, which I love. I love me some Hammer, but it's a thing of obviously some people said, oh well, the stuff that was connected with like Poe, House of Usher, which is where if a total rip on the House of Asher. That's where I got that. You're like, really? No, really.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
They stole it from you, right?
No, oh God, no. But it's just a thing of I wear my heart and my, just like when you were a kid, and you'd have your buttons on your vest or whatever. I wear my stuff on my sleeve. I'm pretty opened up about it. But like you said, it wasn't always safe to do that. Especially like in the 80s, the PMRC and the Satanic Panic, and of course everything was bad except for whatever they told you was okay. And I don't know. I'm glad it's changed.
Oh yeah, Satanic Panic was real. They banned Dungeons and Dragons in my school, and they you weren't allowed to talk about horror stuff. They take your horror comics and stuff away from you. I mean that was all real, and now I think that would be, I think teachers would be refreshed to see somebody reading a horror comic or playing a role-playing game instead of just looking at straight porn in their classroom.
Right. This is true. I actually had a teacher. I'm gonna get real deep into it. That has nothing to do with porn. Just so you're like, that's the last thing you talked about. I had this teacher. Oh God, what's he gonna tell me? But we had a teacher like, you did well in your class. They would have a study hall class, and they would go, okay, if everybody does well and meets their goals, blah blah, we'll play some D&D. Which I was a big D&D kid, and that was
that's awesome.
Freaking cool, right? Very, very ahead of the game. And teacher would get razzed and whatnot.
That's progressive.
But they couldn't argue with the results because kids looked, they were happy, they were doing something, they weren't bored to hell. Sadly, a lot of schools like that, and
they were doing math even.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying you're using all these different skills and all this problem solving and stuff, and people just didn't think about it. Like you said, all they saw was, okay, one movie. If I was ever doing a horror hole show, Mazes and Monsters, Tom Hanks classic. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's such a stupid film. He played Marduk. He was a magic user. And all these kids would play these games, and he started kind of having some issues. I don't know if he was slightly schizophrenic or whatever. Please don't send any hate mail. I'm not saying all schizophrenic people are bad, but I'm just saying he had issues. So he started falling into his character, and he went out on the street, and they were always fighting like a Demogorgon or some sort of lizard type creature. Well, this guy walks up, of course, straight out of Central Casting. Yo, man, give me your wallet. So he goes, oh, my bag of gems. No, I guard them with my life. And the guy's like, come here, stupid. Like, turned into, like, who was the guy, the Norton guy? The comedian. I just sounded like he was like, come here, stupid. So he tries to grab at him. He pulls it.
Yeah.
You know
like,
what I'm talking about.
Ralph Cramden. Is that what we're talking about?
Kind of a, yeah, well, he did like Jim Norton. That's what I was talking about. So
Ed Norton, Ralph Cramden.
All those guys. So he pops out a knife, jabs the guy. The guy runs off. Apparently he dies down the street. He comes to, like, he's like at a payphone. Oh my God, I've had blood on my hands. What's going on? I need help. So boom, he has to go to an institution. And anyway, long story short, he gets out, but he still kind of thinks he's that character. But he's like, I'm having to lay low. I can't let them know.
Is that Mazes and Is that Mazes and Monsters?
Mazes and Monsters, yeah.
Mazes and Monsters.
That's it. Classic. And it was
Tom Hanks.
Yeah, it was like, remember, like, was it Blood on the Asphalt?
Why can't I remember?
I cannot remember. Why? It's so funny because if you ever want to have a good time, you ever like, when they get Smash videos? Take that scene, but put it with Toy Story and like some of the Sheriff Woody scenes. It's classic. That's all I'm saying. It's a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to do. I actually would love to host Mazes and Monsters on Cinema Insomnia and have a whole episode when Mr. Lobo's trying to run a D&D campaign. I think that would be pretty funny.
Dude, I'm down. If you need an extra, holler at me.
All right.
I'm
okay.
not.
I wanted to create a fake. The parody game. The parody game would be called Griffins and Graph Paper.
There it is. That totally makes sense. In fact, you should market that. You should make your own trademark and have like all these jacked up movie references, and you have to go quick. I don't know who were the people that did the choreography in White Zombie. Now, boom, like it's Ultra Nerd Edition.
Oh no. Yes, like Trivial Pursuit. I think Google killed trivia games, probably.
Oh, this is true. This is probably true, but I don't know. It depends.
No Trivial Pursuit anymore.
Maybe you can play it with some Amish kids.
Maybe. There's a lot of Amish kids out here. It's weird to find myself here in Pennsylvania. I'm the busiest. I lived in California for 45 years, and I'm my busiest now that I'm out in Pennsylvania.
Well,
so it doesn't make any sense, but that's so you don't know where your career takes you.
But you don't know what's going to be. It's like running through a field, wearing like wool pants or something. I don't know. Well, you got wool pants. I'm not judging your lifestyle. Point is, you're running and you catch somewhere. It catches stickers. A lot of stickers. What they call them. We call them beggar lice here. Those little seeds that stick on your pants. Which I don't wear pants. I mean, I wear shorts, but I don't wear pants. Year round. Fun fact. Don't believe in them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, but no, I think there's something about where you are right now, because maybe, like, I think if you tried that when you first started, you wouldn't have had the tenacity, or maybe the gumption, all these old words I'm throwing at you, gumption and know-how and go-getterness and fortuitedness. Those are words, I swear.
Yeah.
But now that you had that and you went kind of baptism by fire in L.A., because I remember some of the really wonky public access televisions, some of the Mr. Satan stuff and some of the, there's a guy called the Voice of Truth, or Spirit of Truth, and he was like a gangbanger guy. Anyway, he was crazy. But you're not that guy, and you're doing beautiful stuff, and I appreciate it. Let me ask you real quick. We still got a little bit of time, but give me your website. Give me your anything you got coming up, and if you want to kind of plug any of your new shows that are coming up, lay it on me.
Oh, sure. Yeah, a lot of things. We got a lot of things coming up. We, of course, on OSI 74, we still have our season, our our current season shows that are up there, including 2 live shows. We did a live show with Bride of the Monster and a live show with Teenagers from Outer Space. So if you want to see what the experience of seeing Mr. Lobo live is, those 2 episodes are on OSI 74. I just signed a deal with Alpha Video. We've got the Haunted House special and the Bob Wilkins Halloween special. And EGA out this month. Next month, we've got Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, Gappa, Monsters from a Prehistoric Planet, and Dick Tracy Meets Gruesome, starring Boris Karloff. So we've got those, and then more and more coming. So the if you go to oldies.com, you can start collecting these new DVDs for they're like $5.95 a piece. And they're beautiful. The artwork is amazing. And, I hope that people, I have a streaming channel, but to be honest, sometimes I worry if that streaming channel is going to exist. I'm going to turn on my TV and it's going to be gone. Streaming can be taken away and the gatekeepers can really decide what remains on the platforms that exist and what doesn't, and if you've got a hard copy, if you have a DVD of something, or a Blu-ray, a physical media, VHS, anything, that's insurance. That's that you have it in your hot little hands and nobody can edit it or take it away from you. And it's nice. It's nice to have something on your shelf, something that shows people the kinds of things that you're into.
Right. And that's the thing. It seems, I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm older. As much as I love, an audiobook or something like that, I like to hold the book. I like to smell the book. I sniff books. I'm just going to tell you that right up front. If you're a literary person, especially if it's an old copy, it's like sniffing a cork on a fine wine. It's like, oh, first edition Edgar Allan Poe. Very nice.
Oh, yeah. Little basement smell.
Hey,
nice.
I'm weird like that. I dig that. It's something, it's like you can smell the history in it. And the black mold, but somewhat of the history.
Yeah.
But there's a thing, well, I'm just saying, man, there's something about merch, and there's something about, like you said, having something where somebody walks in and goes, hey, my man, what is that? Oh, I got to turn you on to this because I'm a 1970s pimp, and that's how I talk. Let me help you out, my man. So we come over here and then boom,
right.
another devotee right there. It's beautiful. And, man, that's really cheap, too, on those DVDs. That's cheap.
Oh, yeah. You can get 10 of them for $39.90, which is $3.99 a piece. So it's like I said, it's really it's definitely priced to move. We're not excluding anybody. That paywall is nice and low, and we'll put the entire series out, which would mean over 100 episodes. But obviously, some of the rights and things on some of the films may be harder to clear. But we're just going to put out whatever we can put out as long as people want them.
Right. Is there something that what I'm wondering is, okay, well, let's talk merch. Do you have it? And if you don't, I'm surprised. I think I have an element of like the Gene Simmons thing going on. I'm like, okay, we're going to do a bobblehead, and we're going to do a frisbee. So when you throw it, it makes a ooh sound. And we're going to do. I think I'm channeling William Castle on this. I think really more than Gene Simmons. I love Mr. Castle because he would market everything.
Yeah, I love William Castle. I do a lot of stuff. I have a lot of that kind of, I guess, theater gimmick type stuff. We have Bloodovision glasses, Plantovision glasses. We have a certificate of assurance. We have spook show posters. I do like gimmicks. I have 2 different glow-in-the-dark T-shirts. We have a Miss Mittens glow-in-the-dark T-shirts and a Mr. Lobo, of course, glow-in-the-dark shirt. We have a ringer tee that looks like a classic Maniac design that Jeff Carlson did. I wish we had a bobblehead. We do not. We used to have these little muscle figures where it was like Mr. Lobo's head on a different monster's body.
That's nice.
And those are from years ago. We don't have any more of those, unfortunately.
You need to do some of those.
I'd love to do a bobblehead. That would be a great item.
You remember the little thumb fighter guys, like the WWF guys? You need some of that. You need some of that in your life.
Oh yeah, sure.
probably that expensive.
Finally fight Chris Jericho.
But man, it's about time. It's been, and, I've been sitting here going, this guy needs to go to the mat.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna have to
talk on stage. I don't know if you remember when Chris Jericho attacked me on stage.
Chris just needs a hug around his neck, real tight.
He just needs a lot. He needs a lot less alcohol. Really, that's really all Chris needs.
That would help. Yeah, just certain. Yeah, man. I mean, like I said, this is coming from a guy from Kentucky where the bourbon flows like freaking water. That's what people. I mean, you either think of chicken, rebel flags, bourbon. I'm sure people think incest or something crazy, but that's a thing. Certain people you can't let them imbibe, man. You just can't do it. I do got to talk to you too, man. I want to try to get like a little something for your show, man. I have a thing up here behind me called the International Wall of Horror. And it sounds really snazzy, but it's just different little collection, different people I talk to. So one of these days, if you want to send like a little 8x10 or whatnot, I'm an easy guy. But in the last few minutes that we got, is there something that, which you have a ton of stuff going on, what is something that you want to see? Are we going to see a Mr. Lobo how-to horror host class? Are you going to have like introduction to, web design for, horror shows and stuff? What's the next level?
Well, I'm writing a Mr. Lobo movie. That is something that is taking a lot of my spare time. I have a movie that I'm writing called I Was a Middle-Aged Werewolf.
Oh my God, that's great.
And Mr. Lobo is a recovered werewolf. He has a 25-year chip. He hasn't transformed since college. And he goes back to his old hometown to do a horror-thon, and a lot of outside influence, including a coven of witches that he used to run afoul with when he was in his college days, start kind of tempting him to go back to his old ways. And he has kind of a horror host midlife crisis where he thinks he might want to be a werewolf. And so that's the story that I'm writing. I think it has a lot of twists and turns. It has a lot of cool characters. And hopefully we can get it made. And, it would be great to be like the Ernest of horror hosts. I could go to camp. I could save Christmas. I could go to jail. I could go to Africa. With all the things that Ernest did, but maybe instead of those things, I could meet the monsters or go to Mars or whatever.
Can I throw one suggestion? I'm just saying this as an old guy. I'm not saying this for me, but I'm for a friend. Maybe a few times when he's trying to get back into it, he can't quite achieve werewolfness, and it's sort of like erectile dysfunction.
Lycanthropic dysfunction? Yeah,
yes.
That would be interesting.
And like maybe he'll get the ears in one hand. It's just like walking. It's nothing for me, thanks, in the store. And he's trying to walk out with his ear poked up, about 4.5 inches off his head, and like the worst 5 o'clock shadow ever. I don't know. I'm stupid. It's just the way my mind works.
That's some good ideas. I'll definitely see if it ends up fitting in the story. I'll give you a additional material. Bye.
Wow, man.
Steve Asher.
Yeah, I got to get on that MIBD somehow, right? Well, listen, Mr. Lobo, we're about winding down. Is there any last minute? Well, go ahead.
Didn't even talk about American Scary. Isn't that the whole reason you had me on? Is because of American Scary?
See, you know what? Okay, there's that. And if you want to talk a few more minutes on that, we can, or we can come back and do a even longer episode.
We can come back. I could come back another time. We can talk about all the great horror hosts. It was a national. Let me say something briefly about horror hosts, which I think is interesting. It was a local phenomenon that happened nationally, and the horror hosts of the 50s in the early 60s were of the shock theater era, okay? A lot of them were ghouls like Vampira or Zachary, and they were trying to spook it up along with the movies. The 70s and 80s were the creature features era. The movies that came to television at that time weren't as good. They weren't the Son of Frankenstein or King Kong. The movies that came to the TV in the 70s were Horror Party Beach and The Brain That Wouldn't Die. And so you start getting into the humor, the so bad it's good, the making disparaging comments about the movie. That was the fertile ground that Mystery Science Theater came up out of. So I would say that's the Silver Age. I don't know what we're in now, like the tinfoil age. I think the modern horror host doesn't have a movie package. They don't have the shock package. They don't have the creature feature package. Right now we're dealing with whatever scraps we can find, and whatever films that aren't nailed down. And I think that basically we have a modern horror host is an artist. It's someone who acknowledges the golden age, the silver age, and says, you know what, this is an art form. I grew up with this. I want to express myself with this art form, and they're self-produced. They're not typically the staff announcer at the TV station. They're not typically a local actor in community theater. They're typically a fan who grew up with this, who acknowledges it as an art form, and decides to create their own version of it that is self-produced. They're not a hired hand. Elvira had to audition to be Elvira. The horror hosts of today aren't auditioning. The horror hosts of today are self-made, and I think that's the big difference. And that is my quick and concise history of horror hosts.
Well, okay, I'll say this in sort of a counterpoint. Jane, you ignorant. No, I'm not going to say that. It's one of those things where I hope you remember that. I hope you remember that from Saturday Night Live. But no, it's the thing where.
Oh yeah, Saturday Night Live. Yeah, sure.
Well, it's just like you drag your coat through the woods. Everything's in the woods for me. You've noticed that? What the hell's going on with me? Anyway, but you drag something through the woods, you're going to pick up every little thing that you have. It's what it is. You notice I didn't say shoes because we don't have any, but you come through and you pick up all these different little things. So it's like you'll see certain people will have that. Who was it? Was it Dr. Satan? He spoke with a very echoey voice, and he smoked a cigarette and had the eye patch. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong. Or Dr. Lucifer or something, I believe. I apologize. But you'll see people who...
Dr. Lucifer, yeah, sure.
Okay. And you'll see people who go very straight like that. And then you see the ones that are a little bit more Peter Lorre-ish and kind of talk like that. And you can see, again, their influences. It's very close there, and almost to the point of, taking their bit. It's almost like you like a comedian, but you've got to be careful not to take their bit. And I think that's kind of cool. And if they're doing their own shows, they kind of answer to themselves. I mean, as long as they don't get in trouble with like whatever format they're running, censors and whatnot. To me, it's a little bit more fast and loose because you don't have a lot of these people don't have studio people doing it. They're learning on the fly, and they kind of do whatever the hell they want. So to me, it's kind of a fun time. But I'm curious what's going to come up next. I mean, I don't ever probably think we'll have a simulated horror host. Even Max Headroom wasn't actually simulated, but are they going to make a weird Russian sex doll that shows scary movies? I don't know. Is that next? I don't know.
Yeah. What I think the modern horror host, or beyond, I guess finding relevance in a world where the content is so accessible. These movies are so accessible. So I guess the role of the horror host becomes the role of a curator, is trying to help people sift through the jillion options they have and say, hey, take a look at this movie and let's talk about it. I think that's why YouTube reviewers are so popular. I think a YouTube reviewer, like a James Rolfe or something, those guys are just a modern version of a horror host. It's a cool guy who likes the same stuff that you like and wants to talk about it at length. And I think that, as a horror host, I think, like I said, we have to find ways to keep ourselves relevant. And I think one of the main functions is a horror host is to host horror.
Funny
so
thing.
As long as there is horror, and and someone who wants to present it, there will always be horror hosts. That people always say, "What do you do to be a horror host?" You host horror. That's all you have to do.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if it's a comic book. It doesn't matter if it's a radio show. It doesn't matter if it's a stage show. If you're hosting horror, you are a horror host. So it's not hard to be one. I think like I said, the big issue is to break through, is for a horror host to break through and be relevant to a modern audience. And, it's hard to break through doing anything. It's not specific to horror hosts. I think all entertainers in general have a problem breaking through to an audience because people just have so many options, and they're just buried in options. So yeah, the big job is one to cut through, and then the other job of the audience is to make sure that they share the guys who are good and say, look, I know you're into horror hosts, but this guy over here is really good and you should check him out, because that's really, that word of mouth is how we'll get the next Elvira, or we'll get the next Zachary, or the next Goulardi, or the next Svengoolie. It's the fans are gonna be the ones who are gonna appoint that person of that caliber. It's not gonna come from anywhere else.
Right. Or like the next Chili Willy. It's a thing where I think there's room enough for everybody. I think because, all right, you can take the same film, give it to 5 talented hosts. They're going to have totally different vibes. They're going to get different nuances of it. And it's like you're watching a different film, at least in relation to the back and forth between you and the host. And that's what's great. It's very personalized. And again, people's character comes out in their character. I've not ever written a book that doesn't have a bit of me in it, or even when I did punk music and stuff. It's just there.
It would be a sad world. It would be a sad world with one horror host. I feel like a horror host is a companion, and there are different kinds of companions. We need more than just Elvira and Joe Bob and Svengoolie. There's so many different types of films. There's so many personalities. There's so many different kinds of fans that there definitely is a niche out there for anyone who has a different approach, who wants to present these movies in a different way or talk about these movies in a different way. I think the more the better. I don't think that, I don't think we need a battle royale to thin the herd. I just think that we just need a better platforms so that the people who are doing it can be found.
Right on. Well, Mr. Lobo, I thank you for being on. We are I'm at the end of the cemetery gate, and you can go no further. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick outro.
Wow.
Okay, you can come along. But what I'm saying is don't touch none of my stuff. But I'm going to do a quick outro, and I'm going to get right back with you right after this, okay?
Okay.
Cool. Oh my God. Good people and bad people. It's okay. Everybody likes horror. Mr. Lobo, please make sure to check out his page and, let him know that you watch this. It's always good to kind of get feedback, and everybody loves a little bit of feedback. So, but go out, enjoy your day. Enjoy your life in the sun, people. Just go have fun. But as the sun sets behind the pines and the shadows grow long, make sure to look under your bed, in your closet, maybe in your refrigerator. Might be ahead. I don't know, whatever. I'm not, again, passing judgment. But you may be afraid, but it's okay, because there's learning in fear. There's growth in adversity. I love you all. And until next time, stay scared, everybody.